It's never too late to start over, even after 50. The scent of Martha's lemon verbena, a delicate, almost ethereal fragrance, always brings me back to that sun-dappled porch swing, the one she insisted we buy, even though I groused about the price, claiming it was an indulgence we couldn't afford. Funny how a man can spend a lifetime convinced he knows what truly matters, only to have the universe, in its own brutal, elegant way, rip the blindfold from his eyes. I look at myself now, 62 years old, silver hair a bit thinner, laugh lines etched around eyes that have seen too much and not enough, and I see a lucky man. Truly, utterly lucky. But a few years back, at 53, luck felt like a cruel joke, a cosmic prank played on a perfectly ordinary guy who until then had only ever known the quiet hum of predictability. That hum, that deceptive lull, shattered when the doctor, a young woman with kind, tired eyes, spoke the word that rearranged my world: cancer. It wasn't just a diagnosis, it was a detonation, a brutal, undeniable reminder that everything will be fine was a lie I'd been telling myself for decades. And that, friends, is how a man who once feared he'd die broke, staring down his own mortality, ended up building an $800,000 retirement fund, and how, even after battling cancer, that journey became the most vibrant, terrifyingly alive chapter of my life. I suppose I'd always been a creature of comfort, not in the lavish sense, but in the familiar. My parents, bless their hardworking souls, had lived paycheck to paycheck, their lives a perpetual tightrope walk between necessity and desire, always sacrificing, always worrying. I saw the lines of stress etched on my father's face, the quiet anxiety in my mother's eyes as she stretched every dollar, and I swore to myself, silently, fiercely, that I wouldn't live that way. I wanted ease, a lack of pressure, a certain financial nonchalance that I mistook for freedom. My philosophy became a vague, comforting mantra: work hard, save a little, the big stuff will sort itself out. I had a decent job, nothing fancy, managing logistics for a regional plumbing supply company. It paid the bills, allowed us a comfortable, if unexciting, life in a modest house in the suburbs, and put Sarah through college. Martha, my anchor, my gentle constant, was a kindergarten teacher, her income a steady, reliable hum beneath my own, never enough to make us rich, but always enough to keep us afloat. We had a 401k, sure, one that I contributed to, though never with the fervent dedication of some of my more finance-savvy colleagues. I watched them meticulously track stocks, debate market trends, and fret over economic forecasts. And I just shrug, thinking, what's the point of all that stress? Just put it in and enjoy today. I didn't want to be like my parents, obsessed with money, but in my rebellion, I'd swung too far, embracing an almost willful ignorance. My retirement plan was, in essence, a hazy watercolor, a distant landscape of golf courses and sunny afternoons, painted with broad, optimistic strokes and devoid of any real detail. I figured Social Security would be there, my 401k would magically swell, and our house would be paid off. Everything will be fine, I'd tell Martha, patting her hand when she occasionally, gently raised a concern about our future. She'd nod, her eyes holding a flicker of apprehension I chose to ignore. At 53, when that diagnosis landed, my carefully constructed financial comfort blanket, threadbare and full of holes I'd never bothered to mend, offered no warmth at all. It was just shy of $350,000, a number that, in the brutal light of potential mortality and looming medical bills, felt tragically small. The word carcinoma hung in the air, a bell tolling a slow, measured doom. It was early stage, treatable, they said, but those assurances felt distant, abstract, like an echo from another room. All I could hear was the raw, primal fear, the one that whispers of hospitals and needles, of pain and indignity, of a body turning against itself. My first thought before even the pain, before the endless appointments and the dizzying jargon, was Martha. Her face, pale and etched with worry, flashed before my eyes. Who would take care of her if I couldn't work? If I didn't make it? The idea of her alone navigating a labyrinth of medical debt, of struggling to maintain the life we'd built, was a torment far worse than any physical discomfort. I saw her in my mind's eye, an old woman, bewildered and burdened, and a cold dread settled deep in my bones. The next few months were a blur of biopsies and scans, consultations and decisions. I opted for surgery, then a course of radiation, a gauntlet of interventions designed to eradicate the invader. It was a strange, isolating experience. I'd wake up in the middle of the night staring at the ceiling, my mind a churning maelstrom of fear and self reproach. Why hadn't I been more diligent? Why hadn't I listened to Martha? Why had I been so damn complacent? The weight of what I hadn't done, what I'd ignored, pressed down on me, heavier than any of the physical symptoms. I saw my financial future, once a hazy landscape, now a stark, barren desert stretching endlessly, with Martha trudging across it alone. This wasn't just about money, it was about dignity, about security, about the peace of mind I wanted for the woman who had stood by me, unwavering, through every single moment of this terrifying ordeal. Her quiet strength, her unwavering love, became both my biggest comfort and my deepest guilt. She never complained, never pressured, just held my hand and told me we'd get through it together. And I knew, with a certainty that pierced through the fog of my illness, that getting through it meant more than just surviving, it meant ensuring her future, come what may. After the surgery, after the last round of radiation, there was a period of fragile calm. The doctors used the word remission. It felt like being untethered from a sinking ship, only to realize you're adrift in a vast cold ocean. The immediate threat was gone, but the existential questions, the ones I'd stubbornly avoided for so long, were now amplified, echoing in the cavernous silence of my recovery. I was alive, yes, but what kind of life would it be? One where I constantly fretted about money, where every unexpected expense felt like a death knell. I'd survived cancer, only to face the specter of financial ruin. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was during this period, when the physical pain was fading, but the emotional landscape remained jagged, that Sarah came to visit. She was 32 then, sharp, focused, a financial analyst for a small firm. She'd always been the pragmatic one, the one who planned, who researched, who saw the world in spreadsheets and probabilities. I loved that about her, even if her practicality often felt like a gentle reprimand to my own vague optimism. She found me on the porch swing, the very one I'd once deemed extravagant, staring out at Martha's meticulously tended garden, seeing nothing. My chest felt tight, not from the lingering effects of radiation, but from a knot of fear I couldn't articulate. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice soft, pulling up a chair and settling beside me. She didn't prod, didn't offer platitudes. She just sat, a comforting presence. "Mom says you're doing better." "Better physically, yeah," I mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "The rest of me, I don't know." There was a long silence, filled only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves. Then, slowly, painfully, the words spilled out. The fear for Martha, the inadequacy of my savings, the years of willful neglect. I confessed it all, the shame a bitter taste in my mouth. I just always thought it would sort itself out, honey. I guess I was stupid. Sarah took my hand, her grip firm and warm. "You weren't stupid, Dad. You were human. A lot of people feel that way. They get caught up in the day-to-day, and the future just feels too big, too overwhelming." She paused, then looked directly into my eyes, her own earnest and compassionate. "But you know, worry isn't a strategy, and it won't solve anything. You've faced something bigger than most people ever will. You've earned the right to fight for this, too." Then she told me about Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, she explained, was a client of her firm, a woman in her late 50s who, much like me, had recently stared down a serious health crisis. Evelyn's story, Sarah began, her voice taking on a thoughtful cadence, was a real wake-up call for me, even. She had, well, let's just say, a truly disastrous financial situation. Widowed young, raised 3 kids on a shoestring, made some bad investment choices when she was trying to catch up, chasing those get-rich-quick schemes. She had a mountain of credit card debt, practically no savings, and a house that was underwater. Then, boom, a stroke. Not fatal, thankfully, but it left her with some mobility issues and unable to return to her physically demanding job. She was looking at a retirement that was less golden years and more barely surviving, and she wasn't even 60 yet. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with the memory. The first time I met her, she was defeated, truly broken. She had this look in her eyes, a kind of bone-deep exhaustion. She told me she felt like a burden, that her kids would have to take care of her, and that was just tearing her up inside. But here's the kicker, Dad. Evelyn was also a fighter. She'd fought her whole life, just in different arenas. After her recovery, she decided she wasn't going down without a fight for her financial dignity, too. What did she do? I asked. A flicker of something, maybe hope, maybe just curiosity, stirring within me. She started small, but she started. We went through everything. She cut out every single non essential expense, every coffee out, every subscription she didn't use, every impulse buy. It was brutal, she said, especially at first. But then she started finding creative ways to make extra cash. She couldn't do her old job, but she could do some light administrative work from home, remote data entry. She sold off some old collectibles she'd inherited and cleared out her garage and had a massive yard sale. She even started baking artisanal bread on the weekends and selling it at a local farmer's market, something she loved, a forgotten hobby. Sarah smiled. She was relentless, Dad. She lived by a mantra: every penny has a purpose. The most important purpose for her was paying down that high interest debt and building up an emergency fund. She lived so frugally for a few years that she managed to pay off all her credit cards and build a 6-month emergency fund, something she'd never had. And her retirement? I pressed. Once the debt was gone, she funneled every extra dollar into a Roth IRA. We talked about catch-up contributions, just like we should for you. She diversified into low-cost index funds, just like I'm going to tell you about. She even got certified for some online bookkeeping courses so she could transition from physical labor to a desk job, increasing her income significantly. She was 57 when she started this, Dad, and she just turned 61. 4 years. In 4 years, from being deep in debt with zero savings, she has built up a nest egg of over $200,000, and she's on track to hit $500,000 by 65. But more importantly, Sarah emphasized, she transformed her mindset. She's no longer defeated. She's confident, engaged, and planning trips with her grandkids. She's living with a purpose, with agency. Her health crisis didn't define her future. It catalyzed it. Evelyn's story, delivered with such quiet conviction by my daughter, wasn't just inspiring. It was a mirror. I saw my own complacency, my own fears, but also, for the first time, a glimmer of my own resilience reflected in her journey. If Evelyn, burdened by debt and a more severe health setback, could turn her life around, then surely I, with my modest savings and a second chance, could too. Sarah's words were a cold splash of water. Yes, but also a spark, igniting a forgotten ember within me. I looked into her eyes, no longer seeing just my practical daughter, but a mentor, a guide to a path I finally felt ready to walk. Okay, honey, I said, my voice hoarse, tell me everything. Tell me what I need to do. And so began my education, a crash course in financial literacy at an age when most folks are coasting. Sarah didn't just hand me a list. She sat with me, explained the why behind each step, and patiently answered my endless questions. She understood that for me, this wasn't just about numbers. It was about reclaiming control, about providing for Martha, about proving to myself that cancer wouldn't be the last word on my life's narrative. My initial task, she explained, was to protect the meager assets I had, to build a fortress around our vulnerability. One of the deepest fears that had gnawed at me since the diagnosis was the specter of long-term care. I'd seen friends' parents succumb to illness, draining entire fortunes in nursing home fees or in-home care. The thought of Martha having to make impossible choices, of her bearing the full financial and emotional burden if my health faltered again, was unbearable. Dad, Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm, you've faced mortality head-on. Now you have to plan for longevity, for potential dependency. It's not a fun conversation, but it's vital. We dove into the labyrinthine world of long-term care LTC insurance. I initially balked. Another expense? But Sarah laid out the statistics, the terrifying reality that 1 in 2 Americans over 65 will need some form of long-term care. Think of it as protecting Martha, Dad, she'd urged. Protecting her peace of mind, her future, from being derailed by your potential needs. We researched traditional policies which had their drawbacks, like the use it or lose it nature. Then we discovered hybrid policies, a kind of financial marvel that combined life insurance with a long-term care rider. If we didn't use the LTC benefits, the policy would either retain a cash value or pay out a death benefit to Martha. It wasn't just insurance, it was an investment in our shared future, a concrete manifestation of my renewed commitment to her security. The conversations with Martha during this period were intense, emotional. We talked about aging, about illness, about our deepest fears. But in sharing them and making this difficult decision together, we forged a new layer of intimacy, a deeper understanding of our unspoken vows. Signing those papers felt like a profound act of love, a promise solidified in ink. Next up was disability planning, a concept I'd always vaguely dismissed as something for younger folks, for those still in the thick of their working years. I'm almost 60, Sarah, I'd argued. What's the point? I'll be retired soon enough. But Sarah, ever the diligent one, pointed out my part-time consulting gig, a way to ease into semi-retirement that I'd picked up post-remission, needing the intellectual engagement as much as the income. What if something happens between now and full retirement, Dad? What if you can't work even that part-time job? She reminded me of Evelyn Reed, whose stroke had stripped her of her physical capacity to earn. Your income, no matter how much, is still an asset. It needs protecting. I still had some residual disability coverage from my old company, a benefit I'd never really looked at. Sarah helped me review it, understand its limitations, and, critically, realize it wouldn't fully cover my new reduced income. We adjusted it, found a supplemental policy that fit, ensuring that even a temporary setback wouldn't completely torpedo my burgeoning financial plans. It was a tedious process, full of jargon and fine print, but with each layer of protection we put in place, the knot in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a quiet sense of order. The world of Medicare, I quickly discovered, was a bureaucratic beast of biblical proportions. Parts A, B, C, D, Medigap plans, it felt like deciphering an ancient, forgotten language. My head spun with the acronyms, the deductibles, the copays, the labyrinthine choices. Honestly, Sarah, I grumbled one evening, staring at a stack of brochures that might as well have been written in Sanskrit, this is enough to make a man wish he'd just stayed sick. She laughed, a gentle, understanding sound. I know, Dad. It's designed to confuse you. But there's gold in those hills, I promise. You just need a guide. She showed me how to compare. She brought up government websites, independent insurance brokers, walked me through the nuances of each Medigap plan. Plan G, she explained, was often the sweet spot for many, covering most of the gaps that Medicare Parts A and B left behind, especially after the initial Part B deductible was met. We meticulously cross-referenced my specific prescription list against various Part D plans, looking for the lowest overall cost, not just the lowest premium, which often hid higher copays. It was like being a detective, tracking down every dollar, every potential saving. And slowly, painstakingly, the picture emerged. By carefully selecting a Medigap Plan G and optimizing my Part D coverage for my actual medications, considering the projected changes for 2025, we found an estimated savings of nearly $5,000 a year. $5,000. That wasn't just pocket change. That was real money, money that could be invested, money that could accelerate my journey towards that $800,000 goal. The relief, the sheer satisfaction of untangling that knot was immense. It was a tangible victory, a testament to the power of diligent, informed action over passive resignation. With the defensive lines drawn, it was time to go on the offensive. Sarah introduced me to the concept of catch-up contributions. For someone over 50 like me, the IRS allows you to contribute more to your IRAs and 401ks than younger folks. It's like a second chance, a recognition that life happens, and sometimes you need to play catch-up. For 2025, she explained, the projected catch-up contribution for IRAs was $7,500 on top of the regular contribution, bringing the total to a hefty $15,000. This wasn't just a rule, it was an invitation, a financial lifeline extended directly to me. But contributing $15,000 a year when you're still reeling from medical bills and adjusting to a new financial reality? That felt like climbing Everest without oxygen. This was where the every penny has a purpose mantra, so vividly embodied by Evelyn Reed, came into play. I scrutinized every line item of our budget, not with a sense of deprivation, but with a fierce determination. The daily coffee runs? Gone. The impulse buys at the grocery store? Curtailed. We weren't living on ramen noodles, but we were intentional. I sold old furniture Martha had been wanting to replace anyway, decluttered the garage and sold tools I no longer used, even took on a few extra handyman jobs for neighbors, skills I'd always had but never thought to monetize. Every small windfall, every extra dollar went straight into that IRA. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration, moments when I felt the old habits tugging at me, whispering just this once, what's the harm? But then I'd think of Martha, of her serene face, of the peace I wanted to buy her, and the resolve would harden. It wasn't about what I was giving up, it was about what I was building. And then there was Social Security, another piece of the puzzle, another critical component of my retirement income stream. Sarah taught me about the cost of living adjustment, COLA, how Social Security payments are adjusted each year to keep pace with inflation. For 2025, analysts were projecting a COLA of around 3.2%. It seemed like a small number, but it was crucial to factor into my long-term planning. It meant that my purchasing power wouldn't erode quite as quickly, that my future income would have a built-in hedge against rising prices. I created spreadsheets, meticulously plugging in numbers, projecting out years into the future. It felt less like crunching numbers and more like charting a course, navigating a complex landscape towards a more secure horizon. For the first time, I felt like a captain of my own financial ship, rather than a passenger hoping for calm seas. The final piece of Sarah's master plan, and perhaps the one that required the most significant shift in my ingrained habits, was how I invested. For years, I dabbled, chasing hot stocks, listening to tips from well-meaning but ultimately misguided friends. My portfolio was a hodgepodge, a chaotic collection of individual stocks and actively managed mutual funds with high fees, reflecting my own scattered approach to planning. Dad, Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm, you're not a day trader. You're a long-term investor. You need simplicity, diversification, and low costs. She introduced me to the philosophy of Vanguard and other low-cost index funds. It was a revelation. Instead of trying to pick winners to beat the market, the idea was to own the market, to invest in funds that passively track broad market indexes like the S&P 500 or the total stock market. The genius was in the simplicity and the incredibly low fees. Why pay a fund manager 1% or 2% a year to try and beat the market, Sarah explained, when most of them don't, and you can simply match the market for a fraction of the cost, like 0.04%. The math was undeniable. Over time, those tiny differences in fees compounded into colossal sums. It was like discovering a hidden stream of water, quietly but consistently filling my reservoir. I began the process of consolidating my disparate accounts, selling off the individual stocks, and moving everything into a handful of low-cost index funds. There was a moment of trepidation, a feeling of letting go of control, of trusting in the vast, impersonal machinery of the market. But Sarah's patient explanations, her unwavering belief in the long-term efficacy of this approach, eventually convinced me. Set it and forget it, she'd often say, echoing the wisdom of legendary investors. It was liberating. No more daily checking of stock prices, no more agonizing over quarterly reports. My money was quietly working for me, diversified across thousands of companies, participating in the broader economic growth of the country. It was elegant, efficient, and profoundly reassuring. It mirrored the lesson cancer had taught me. Focus on what you can control and let go of what you can't. The journey wasn't without its bumps. There were days when the market dipped and I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the old anxieties, whispering doubts. There were moments when I chafed at the sacrifices, when a new gadget or an exotic vacation beckoned. But each time I'd pull out my spreadsheet or talk it through with Martha or call Sarah, and each time the purpose would reassert itself. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the freedom it represented, the security it promised, the peace it would bring to Martha and to me in our golden years. One specific moment stands out, a vivid illustration of this internal shift. Martha had mentioned wistfully a small antique rocking chair she'd seen at a local shop. It was beautiful, hand-carved, and frankly, expensive. My old self would have bought it immediately, a small extravagance. But my new self paused. We had recently made a significant catch-up contribution, and buying that chair would mean dipping into our carefully allocated funds, delaying our progress. I struggled with it for a day, the desire to please Martha warring with my newfound discipline. That evening, I told her about my internal conflict. Martha, ever perceptive, smiled softly. Arthur, she said, taking my hand, the chair is lovely, but what we're building, this peace of mind, that's far more beautiful. We don't need things to be happy. Her understanding, her shared commitment to our goal was more valuable than any antique. The next day, instead of buying the chair, I took the amount it would have cost and made an extra unscheduled contribution to my IRA. It was a small act, but it felt like a profound victory, a tangible demonstration of how deeply my values had shifted. Slowly, steadily, the numbers on my financial dashboard began to climb. $350 became 400K, then 500K, then $600. Each milestone was a quiet celebration, a testament to persistence and intelligent planning. It wasn't just the money growing, it was me growing. I became more confident, more engaged with our future. My conversations with Martha about retirement shifted from vague worries to concrete plans: which hiking trails we'd explore, which parts of the country we'd visit in our small camper, the hours I'd dedicate to volunteering at the local animal shelter. The cancer, once a terrifying harbinger of the end, had become, ironically, the catalyst for a more vibrant, more intentional life. It forced me to confront my complacency, to shed the illusion of eternal youth, and to actively, fiercely build the future I wanted, not just passively hope for it. Now, as I sit here on the very porch swing that began this story, the lemon verbena still fragrant in the afternoon sun, I can tell you that I'm nearly there. My retirement fund is nudging the $800,000 mark. It's a number, yes, a significant one, but it represents so much more than just dollars and cents. It represents peace of mind. It represents freedom, not just from working, but from the gnawing anxiety that once shadowed my days. It represents the ability to look at Martha, her hair now as silver as mine, and know that her future is secure, that she won't be burdened. It represents the ability to bounce my grandkids on my knee, truly present, truly enjoying these precious moments rather than being distracted by financial worries. The cancer, that brutal, unwelcome visitor, didn't define me. It refined me. It taught me that life is precious, fleeting, and that every single day is an opportunity to live with purpose, to plan with intention, and to love with abandon. It showed me that true wealth isn't just in the bank account. It's in the quiet confidence that comes from taking control, from facing fears head on, and from knowing that even when life throws its most terrifying curveballs, you can still chart a course towards a future filled with joy and security. It proved to me that it's never, ever too late to start. Whether you're 50, 60, or 70, the power to shape your financial destiny and in turn your life rests squarely in your hands. You just have to pick up the pen and start writing your own story. And if my story, this messy, imperfect journey from complacency to conviction, resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of hope or a nudge towards action, then I truly believe you've already taken the first most important step. This isn't just my story. It's a testament to what's possible when you confront fear and choose courage. So, if you found value in what I've shared today, please do me a solid and hit that like button. Every single one helps us reach more folks who might be feeling lost or overwhelmed, just like I was. And if there's someone in your life who needs to hear this message, someone who's feeling trapped by their financial past or paralyzed by the future, then please share this video with them. You never know whose life you might change with a simple click. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, your experiences. Have you faced a similar wake-up call? What's one financial step you've taken, big or small, that made a huge difference in your life? Or maybe you're just starting out, feeling a bit overwhelmed, and you've got a question. Whatever it is, drop a comment down below. Let's build a community here, a place where we can share our struggles, our triumphs, and learn from each other. Your wisdom, your insights, they matter. And hey, if you want to join me on this journey, if you want more candid conversations about navigating life's challenges with a little more wisdom and a lot more peace of mind, then don't forget to subscribe to my channel and ring that notification bell. That way, you won't miss out on our next conversation. Remember, it's never too late to take control, to write a new chapter, to build the life you truly want. Don't wait for a crisis. Start today, even if it's just one small step. I'm rooting for you. We're all in this together.